Hi, so I'm Eve Fantazi, and for this project I did the first article, which was titled, I think it was titled, What Does It Mean to Die? Um, and I chose this article because I think it considered a lot of bioethical issues that we haven't really discussed in class yet. I mean, through the units that we've done so far, most of the cases were to die or not to die, like organ donation, influenza, and the war against vaccines. They were all considering how do we protect life. Organ donation was discussing who gets a chance at another life. The war against vaccine was how to protect people from death and who gets to decide how is best. And influenza was who gets to decide whether or not to live or die. And it was typically like black and white, who gets to live, who gets to die, who is living, who is dying. But this article delved into like what even is dying, and it takes everything that we've done so far there just that step further to decides that what does that mean. It's something that we are often assume that we know the answer to. So this article is about this girl named Jai McMath, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing something wrong, who was a 13-year-old African American girl from Oakland, California, and she went to the hospital for a simple surgery just to get her tonsils removed. The surgery itself went smoothly, but afterwards Jai soon began to display bad side effects, including coughing up blood, and her mother and father and grandmother became really worried and expressed concern. But the hospital staff were really dismissive and rude to them, and they said that weren't treated like people. So a couple days later, Jahai was declared brain dead and ended up on a ventilator. And in California and in most states, families are supposed to be allowed a reasonable period of accommodation before disconnecting from a ventilator, which should be long enough to allow a family to gather, but not so long that the hospital neglects the needs of other patients in need of care. Because once you're considered brain dead, that's considered dead. So the hospital staff urged the family to take Jai off the ventilator, but the family refused. So they requested safe operation that would allow for safer transport to a new hospital in either New Jersey or New York, which are the states where brain dead can be rejected as death. But the hospital refused, saying that accommodating this request would raise significant concerns of justice and fairness. But the family moved Jai to a new hospital anyways, where they were attacked. Their decision was attacked by doctors and bioethicists alike. So right now there's a very clear definition of death, which is necessary to relieve pain on families, and also having a lenient definition would cause a lot of confusion with organ donation. So at this new hospital, Jahai began to stabilize and she received a feeding tube, and her mom, Nyla, began asking Jahai to move parts of her body, and after a slight delay, Jahai would move that body part. And she also soon began menstruating. They ran another brain scan, and most of her brain was destroyed, but some parts of it still functioned, which raised questions of the mind versus the brain, and if what mental death means. Like, is it losing the capacities that make us human, or unable to engage in commerce with the surrounding world? So this is a really important discussion. So I feel like the ethical questions raised is, what is the definition of death? And should Jahai's family get to decide it? Who gets to decide that? And can it mean different things for different people? So for this, I kind of thought that the most important principles are autonomy. In Jahai's family's point of view, it would be autonomy and non-maleficence. So autonomy would consider that people should be able to make decisions for themselves, and each individual should be able to decide what death means for them. In that point of view, that perspective should be accommodated for and respected. So from this point of view, the doctor should not take Jahai off the ventilator. Non-maleficence is also involved here because it would be harming the daughter and also, I guess, her family to take her off life support. This would be definitely ending her life, no doubt. There, it would hurt her. And this would be damaging because it's possible that Jahai's life is not over. But from the perspective of doctors and bioethicists, beneficence is a really important concept here because this complicates organ donations. It would depend, it would choose, vary what people can donate, and it would be taking away the resources from people who could possibly be healed by the resources of organs. By Jahai, if people who are brain dead are not declared dead, this would put many more lives at risk. And then also the idea of justice and the law is played in here. And what right does a family have to keep Jahai on life support, and why should they have access to those resources? Because the law does say that she's dead. So currently, brain dead means losing the capacities that make us human and not being able to engage with the surrounding world, which is the current definition legally. This may vary from person to person, religion to religion, but legally, that's the definition. So who should get to violate that? Why? Who determines that? So I think the right answer here is the opinion of doctors and bioethicists. The side of that law. Because resources such as organs and hospital space and other doctor time, the time of doctors, this make it an important situation, and it's important to find a place to draw the line, because by not being able to decide this, there are other lives at risk. And then also, I think the other important bioethical question is who is responsible for life, and what is the responsibility of doctors and nurses. And I think in the case of Jahai's family, they would agree that non-maleficence is a really important factor here. So what causes the least amount of harm? That should be the doctors accommodating for the family and not taking her off. That should be something that the doctors should decide, because it would be causing the least amount of harm, and it's the responsibility of doctors to help whatever life they can. And also autonomy. If Jahai's family want doctors to help, it's the responsibility of doctors to follow their wishes and help them with their daughter. But from the perspective of the hospital in this situation, beneficence is a really important concept, which I also think plays into justice. Because by keeping Jahai alive, time and resources are being spent on a patient who's brain dead and could be used to help or heal someone else. And also, this plays into justice and allocation of resources. Why should Jahai deserve them if doctors say that she has no possibility of living again, and if she's declared brain dead and will not be able to function? And again, I do agree with the side with doctors, because yes, doctors are responsible to help a patient whenever they can, and they're supposed to do whatever they can to make sure someone can be as safe and healthy as they possibly could be. But this only applies to a certain point, because I think the answer here is that it's really, really important to, again, accommodate for the community and the other lives that might be put at risk because of this accommodation, and all of the resources that are being lost. And the reason that this is a really important issue is because after this situation with Jahai, doctors actually saw a spike in people who were fighting to keep their loved ones or their relatives on life support. So this is a trend that people have been jumping on, that people have chosen to remain on ventilators even when there's no possibility of them healing, just because they can, and if they can keep that sliver of hope, they want to. And then it's also really, really important that there's a really clear definition of death. Again, organ donation is a really important one, because brain death, the death defined by brain dead, has saved so many lives, and it's made lives better for so many people. And it's also important to be able to relieve pain on families. I know that in this resource it talked about how the family might be clinging on to this hope because there's comfort in knowing that, or thinking or believing that your child has some life left in them, even if they are brain dead. And then there's also, what I also thought was really interesting is that the idea of mental death was something that was really embraced by the Nazis in 1920. It was a largely regarded medical term, based mostly on this legal text called Permission to Destroy a Life Unworthy of Living. And I feel like this is really significant because if someone has the right to determine who is alive and who is dead because of something like organ damage, the brain is an organ, and if one organ is damaged and they are brain dead, and a child is determined as dead based on that one organ damage, who gets to, where do you draw the line? I mean, it's possible that someone takes this principle of being brain dead equals death because they're not being able to fully engage with the surrounding world, and applies it to situations that are not even similar to this. Like, it's possible that someone takes this principle and reads it like the Nazis did and thinks of it as, well, if someone is not able to fully function, then you can apply this to people who were born with disabilities, or you could take it so much farther, because, like, if someone is not perfect, then who has permission to say that a life is not worth living? Which I really think is really interesting, and it's a really important question to discuss, because it really does need an answer when you're talking about other people's life and life versus death. It's a really, really important issue that can be really harmful to a lot of people. So thank you, and I'm sorry, I'm sick.